This is the lecture on biological molecules. It is section or chapter 2, section 3 in your textbook. And so it's important to know about these biological molecules because they comprise the structure and function of all living organisms. So there used to be a term, or there still is a term rather, called organic chemistry. And basically what that is the study of compounds that have carbon in them. Now, organic chemistry is where you learn all about carbon and all of these type of molecules. You could also take a biochemistry class where you would just talk about the organic molecules or these biological molecules. Today we're just going to learn about the biological molecules. So what elements does carbon bond with? Well, the hint I give you here is called sponge, and I talked a little bit about this in class. Okay, and if you remember, you should know that sponge stands for all the elements that are commonly found in the biological molecules. So sulfur, phosphorus, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and carbon. So carbon is unique for a couple of reasons. One is that it has 4 valence electrons. 2 is that it can form covalent bonds with a lot of elements. 3 is because living organisms all have carbon in them. 4 would be that carbon can bond to other carbons. So if you see here, right here, we have carbon where it bonds to another carbon. And this carbon can also form single, which is here, double, and triple bonds. So you might want to stop the video if you're not sure of how those look. But carbon will always have 4 bonds to it. So all you have to do is look at the carbon in and of itself and see how many bonds are attached to it. And then 6, carbon can also form rings. If you remember what our carbohydrate monomer, saccharide or monosaccharides look like, they can form rings in a circle, such as right here, and this glucose one. And the fructose has it also. So what is a macromolecule? We know that macro means large, so macromolecules are giant molecules, and they're made from thousands or even hundreds of thousands of smaller molecules. A monomer is a small unit of this macromolecule. A polymer, oops, excuse me, did that move? There we go. A polymer is a large molecule that is made up of monomers. Polymerization is a process where these compounds are joined together to form the polymers. So we know that there are 4 major classes of macromolecules, and we are getting ready to talk about each one of them. So first we'll start off with carbohydrates. These contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and that carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen is usually in a ratio of 1 to 2 to 1. The monomer for them is called monosaccharides, and it's the main source of energy for mainly for animals and for plants too, in the form of glucose. And here's a glucose molecule. It's also used for structural purposes in plants, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. So glucose is found in fruits and many foods. You also have galactose, which is a type of sugar, and it's found in milk. And then fructose is found in fruit. Now if you notice, there's a little pattern here. And if you see this suffix, OSE, for the most part, that's going to mean that it's a sugar, some type of sugar, some type of carbohydrate. And then here is the formula for glucose, C6H12O6. If you were to go through this molecule here and count all the carbons, you'd see that there's 6, there's 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. It is also the formula for galactose and for fructose. Okay? The only difference is that they maybe are, or not maybe, but they are in a different configuration. Now a disaccharide An example of a disaccharide would be sucrose. So that means it's two of them put together. So to make this sucrose, it's glucose and fructose put together. And the common name is table sugar. And you guys know what that table sugar is. Now with the complex carbs, these are when you have many of these monosaccharides. Another name for a complex carb is a polysaccharide. And another name for it is also a starch. So starches are also complex carbs. Here's the starch again. Okay. Now these complex carbs are found in animals. The name for the starch in animals, and when I say animals I'm talking about humans also, is glycogen. And it's used for storage of glucose. Now for long-term storage of glucose, it is called fat. All right. So this glucose is stored as glycogen, and usually that's going to be regulated by your liver and your pancreas. You've heard of insulin, and it kind of regulates when the glucose is released from the glycogen and when it's not. In plants, it's called starch, and that's where they put their excess sugar storage. Now also in plants they have complex carb called cellulose, and you may have heard of this. And the cellulose is what gives plants their structure or their rigidity. When we, sometimes they'll say you need to eat more fiber. Well, cellulose is the fiber that people are talking about when they say that. Next we move on to lipids. Lipids are made mostly from hydrogens and carbons. We had that little glycerol on the left-hand side, but those fatty acid tails are made mostly of carbon and hydrogen, and they are in a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 hydrogens for every carbon. They are not water soluble, meaning that they don't mix in water or they don't dissolve in water. Some types of lipids are fats, oils, and waxes. Okay. Some of the functions of lipids are to store energy. They become parts of biological membranes. You'll see that when we do the cell, when we talk about the cell membrane. They are waterproof covering. Think of plants as far as waterproof covering. Think of your skin. For the most part, water just doesn't soak into your skin. It takes a while, and then that covering kind of wears off if you're in the water a lot, and then it will soak in. Steroids and steroid hormones. Okay. As far as lipids structure goes, they're made up of a glycerol and a fatty acid, and then they will form what's called a triglyceride. So those three plus the fatty acid gives you a triglyceride. Now the process is called a condensation reaction. It also can be called dehydration synthesis. Remember, to synthesize something means to build up or to make it. Now, you've heard of saturated fats, unsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats. Well, here's your definitions for them. Basically, what you're looking for in the fatty acid tail is whether or not there are any carbon-carbon double bonds. And if you look at this structure here, there's a carbon-carbon double bond. That means that it's unsaturated. If there's more than one, it's polyunsaturated. If there are none, it's saturated. Now make sure you don't look at this bond here or this one here. Those are not the double bonds we're talking about. It has to be between a carbon and another carbon. Now one thing that's kind of interesting about these lipids is that if they're saturated, usually they're a solid at room temperature. Now if you look at this little chart I have here, this tells you the melting point. So for instance, this one here, stearic acid, has no double bonds. So that means it's probably going to be a solid at room temperature. And do you remember what room temperature was in Celsius? That's right, it was 22 degrees Celsius. So this one here definitely would be a solid, right? What about this one here at room temperature? That's right, it would be a liquid. Now moving on to proteins. Proteins have nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in them. The monomer for them is an amino acid. Now this is the basic structure of an amino acid. This right here is called an amino group. NH3. Okay, it's NH3. This is a carboxyl group. Usually it's written like this. And then here's your hydrogen. Now this right here is our R group. And see where it says variant? That means the stuff that's connected here can vary. It can vary. And that's what makes your different amino acids. There's actually 20 different amino acids. You have things like tyrosine, tryptophan, cytosine. There are many different types of amino acids. Well, not cytosine, I'm sorry. Let me think of another one. Histidine, that would be another amino acid. Cytosine is a nucleic acid. But there's 20 different amino acids, and that in turn contributes to proteins being pretty diverse molecules. Now, when you link amino acids together, remember we have that condensation reaction, or the dehydration synthesis, and what forms is called a peptide bond. So the bond right here, okay, is called a peptide bond. And many times when you have the amino acids hooked together, they might call it a peptide. Now in reality, a protein is a couple of polypeptides, because you can have, remember it's a really giant molecule, it's a macromolecule. And so I'd say proteins are probably the most diverse, and they do many, 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 many things. Some of the things they do are they function as enzymes where they control the rate of reactions. They can regulate cell processes. They can form cellular structures, which we'll look at when we look at the cell. They can transport substances in and out of cells. They have what are called transport proteins. And they can fight disease. If you remember, the word antibodies, well, those are made of proteins. Lastly, we'll talk about nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are made up of the hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and phosphorus. Their monomers are called nucleotides, and their main function is to transmit genetic information. So here's a picture of a nucleotide. Now, if you remember, we didn't make this model in class, but here it's made up of a nitrogen base, which can vary. Sorry, get that there. Your nitrogen base, a phosphate group, and a 5-carbon sugar. So that 5-carbon sugar is different depending on if it's DNA or RNA. Some nucleotides are found as ATP. If you remember adenosine triphosphate, you may have learned of this. If not, we're going to be talking about it. And that's what captures and transfers chemical energy. The two main types of nucleic acids are RNA and DNA. And as I said before, they both actually transmit genetic information in different ways. But RNA contains the sugar ribose, and DNA contains the sugar deoxyribose. And the difference between the two sugars is that the deoxyribose has an oxygen that is removed. Otherwise, they're very, very similar. Okay, let's go ahead and review a little bit. So large carbohydrate molecules such as starch are known as, that's right, polysaccharides. Let's go ahead and look at this one. The next one, which of the following is true about cellulose? Okay, and then lastly, major difference between polysaccharides and proteins. That's right, polysaccharides are made of monosaccharides and proteins are made of amino acids.